What's up, duelists? Today I've finally got an updated version of Welly Dad. I know a lot of people have been asking for this deck. It's one of my favorite decks. It was invented by Control Alt Defeat, one of the most powerful duelists of all time, and I have been innovating it a little bit over the last month or so. I think I'm finally happy with where the sideboard is at. That was kind of my last sort of big issue with the deck was the sideboard. I'm still very happy with this main deck 40. I think it's pretty near perfect. The only things you can consider changing is the Space Typhoon can go to the side for the Trunade, vice versa. And then also one Armageddonite could maybe become something like a Breaker the Magical Warrior, which I think is pretty good in general. Or you could play like another Book of Life maybe, but I really do like having four ways to just set up your graveyard to make sure your Telekinetic, Power Well, your Book of Life, and your Call of the Haunted are live. For the most part, the main deck feels spot on. Sometimes you're going to draw a double Mally, which you will see in today's game, but it's actually not too bad in this deck because you can put back the Malicious with the Plague and then still be able to make plays. In the sideboard, we got two Cyber Dragon. This is for machines. This is also a way to kill Consecrated Light, which can be a problem for this deck. We got Gores. This is for Blackwings. You side in Gores against Blackwings. You play it against them. You apply the pressure with the Gores, and then hopefully you build up enough resources in the meantime to be able to push through their defense and kill them. Gores is pretty important in that matchup in particular. He's not very good against the Christia decks, and he's also not very good in general because it's pretty hard for people to attack through Krebins for the most part. They have to spend resources to like clear this guy, and then getting in direct attacks after that's kind of difficult. But in general, he is pretty good in some matchups that don't have as much trouble clearing the Krebins. Double Doom Caliber Knight. This is for being Doom Caliber Knight. He helps you break serve. He helps you kill like Shining Angels, DD Warrior Ladies, that kind of thing. And then he also helps you go for game shots through Gores and Battle Fader against Frogs. You actually do side this in against Frogs, weirdly enough. Yeah, I know it sounds strange, but you bring it in just so you can go for that kill shot. Kaiku the Ghost Destroyer. This is also for Frogs. This is also for Zombies. He's not super good against the Recruiter heavy decks like Zombies, but he stops Mizuki, he stops Dark Armor, he stops the stuff you really care about, and he also stops people from crowing you, which can be pretty important too. Giant Trunade, of course, sweep the back row against Glads. Book of Moon, this is for Vanities for Christia. My Body is a Shield, this is actually a new addition. This is for Herald of Orange Light. The fairy matchup's really rough. I'm not exactly sure how to approach it. I don't really like Light Mirror because you can't really effectively attack over a DD Warrior Lady in this deck anyway, unless you're making Revive King, which is kind of your game plan there. So I just like My Body as a Shield to protect your Bionic from Herald of Orange Light, and then you can just go for your OTK safely. And then you have Lightning Vortex. This is also for like Christia stuff, just to clear it. It's also a discard outlet. You can get your grave set up for the Telekinetic or for the Book of Life, or for whatever else, really. Double Bottomless for Blackwings. Trap Stun. This is to help you push through heavy trap decks and OTK. There are a lot of decks lately that have been playing Threatening Roar and Wabaku, and this is my sort of response to those decks, is to play Trap Stun. I might even go up to 2, depending on the metagame. I think this card is pretty fucking good, especially when you're trying to OTK people. It's like solid in the place of the Giant Trunade as well, so you might want to move the Giant Trunade to the main over the Space Typhoon and then add a second Trap Stun to the sideboard. That might be something worth considering. I don't know. I know some people have had success with Giant Trunade in this deck, so I don't know. And then double pulling the rug, of course, for Monarchs. The one change to the extra deck is we did end up cutting the Stardust Dragon. This was something that RJ suggested for the Gaia Knight, and he does come up quite a bit, so it was a pretty solid change. The rest of the extra deck I'm pretty happy with. All of these monsters come up, particularly the Red Dragon Archfiend. This guy comes up. Now, there was a skill drain in the original sideboard, which I really did like, but I just had trouble finding space for it, honestly. I want all of these other cards. I think they're all like pretty important. I don't think you can really afford to cut any of these. Maybe you could have a skill drain over pulling the rug, but that just feels kind of awkward. I really just like having the pulling the rugs to stop Caius, and skill drain can be used somewhere else. You already pay a lot of life points in this deck between Krebins, Power Well, Solemn Return, Brain Control, so yeah, it's kind of difficult to support yet another card that pays a lot of life points. I know we have My Body as a Shield, but you kind of need it to win the game. Let's go ahead and hop into the replay. So this is actually a really, really tough replay. It's against Dragons, which is, I think, one of this deck's worst matchups, because they have Drago, and Drago stops a lot of your stuff. Our opening hand is already not super great, but we have Dust Shoot and we have Krebin, so we can buy at least a decent amount of time. We pick up Windblast, which is amazing. We're going to be able to pitch Malicious, Windblast something, and then set up for an 8-star Synchro next turn, plus have the Dust Shoot for backup. So this is actually a pretty solid start. If they don't have a chainable back row, we can even do something like Windblast, pitch the Mally, bounce their monster, Special Mally, summon Stratos, pop their back row, and then make an 8-star that way. The Stratos is going to be pretty bad this game. It's an 1800 vanilla. because searching the second malicious is not going to happen with this hand, but at least it can apply some pressure alongside a Stardust Dragon and provide a 2-turn clock. So we set the 2 and we summon the Krebins and we pass. We do gun the Dust Shoot in the draw phase, and we see that the opponent is on dragons. But they are playing some like interesting tech, stuff that I actually don't think is very good. Skill Drain, while it is like cool, your effects are usually better than your opponent's. Your Red Eyes Darkness Metal is better than your opponent's cards, and your Drago is better than your opponent's cards. So Skill Drain is pretty bad in these types of decks. And then Whitestone of Legend, I actually really don't like the Whitestone and Blue Eyes stuff outside of Dragon Turbo, where you're playing like Upstarts and Rejuvenations. I feel like the draw engine just on its own is pretty clunky unless you're going for the full Turbo style deck. As it stands, it's not very great to make synchros alongside Totem Dragon, so it's just like an awkward inclusion, and it doesn't really apply pressure the same way something like a DD Warrior Lady would here. In any case, we take the Red Med, which basically invalidates his entire hand, but he does have Gold Sarcophagus, so if we're not able to find a way to really push through damage, we won't be able to beat him by the time he gets Future Fusion. So he Gold Stars for Future Fusion, sets the Whitestone, and sets the back row and passes. Since I know it's Skill Drain, I actually don't have to use the Wind Blast quite yet. I can wait to chain it to Skill Drain, hopefully get the 1,000 points of burn. And unfortunately, we do draw our double Malicious. So this is like one of the few ways this deck can brick, is if you draw Book of Life, double Malicious, Stratos. It's like one of the few like 4-card combinations in which you can brick. There's another 4-card combination where you draw 3 Krebins and Plague, or some combination of 3 Krebins plus E-Telly. That's like another way you can brick. It's pretty rare that this deck bricks because all of the cards are insanely broken, and you can usually navigate to a win. But even this isn't too bad. We can just summon Stratos, run over his monster, and then get in some chip damage. We know he has Skill Drain, so the Whitestone's going to search for Blue Eyes. We're going to hit directly for 1,200, but the chip damage could start to add up. Ooh, better stop showing his hand. So we know Blue Eyes, we know Wyvern, and we know Totem Dragon. He's going to set another monster and a back row and pass. We don't know the new back row. We pick up another Krebins, which is actually a decent draw provided he doesn't have a sweeper. As you can see here, the Skill Drain is not really doing anything. He would have much rather preferred to have like a real spot removal spell. The spot removal traps are actually insane in this deck. I personally play triple D Prison in my Dragons list. I also play double Bottomless. I also play Mirror Force, and I also play Torrential. So that's like a ton of removal spells. But because I saw Skill Drain and because I saw Blue Eyes, I'm thinking if he is on removal, it's just Mirror Force and that's it, or just Torrential and that's it. So I feel pretty comfortable gambling my Krebins into his back row. I actually just summon it straight up. Plus, we're not really winning this game unless we start to apply a ton of pressure. So that's what we start to do. We Krebins attack, Stratos attack. I'm kind of banking on his other back row being something kind of useless, like a Royal Oppression or maybe a Skill Drain or a Solemn Judgment or something like that. That wouldn't really do too much here. We're not going to Synchro because we just don't need to. We have Phoenix Wing Wind Blast to protect our board. We have pressure. This is not quite lethal. No, this is lethal pressure if he doesn't commit that Wyvern on his next turn. So we pass. He does get Future Fusion, which is pretty unlucky for us. He's able to bring out the Totem Dragon, reveal 5-God Dragon, and then send his 5. This is another awkward 5 send here. Prime Material's not really going to do that much. He honestly should have sent like double Wyvern, double Red Med. Searching another Blue Eyes is kind of pointless when you already have Blue Eyes in hand. The Drago being in the grave can be useful, but you're probably going to have to flip the Skill Drain next turn to even survive. So sending Drago doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. Honestly, you really just want to set up the Wyverns and the Red Med. Probably not even bring back the Totem Dragon here and just bring back the Red Meds in the end phase. He's going to go ahead and sacrifice it for Blue Eyes and then pass a turn, not attacking to try and proc our back row. We pick up Goblin Zombie, which is the perfect draw. Had we drawn anything less good than Goblin Zombie here, we probably would have got owned. We go for the Phoenix Wing, pitching Goblin Zombie, target Blue Eyes. And this is going to be game if it resolves. Alas, it doesn't resolve, but because he has Dark Bribe. But even if it didn't resolve, like let's say it got solemned or whatever, negated, trap stunned, decreed even, that means we can Book of Life and then Synchro off and then set up for either Red Dragon to crash plus a lethal Synchro combination or a large number of things. Here we go for Book of Life, banish the Red Med and the Goblin Zombie, completely shutting off his entire graveyard. There's nothing there that even matters anymore. Summon the Plague, Synchro on a Brownic, Goblin Zombie search Mizuki, pitch 2, force the Skill Drain, and then stack for Plague, Synchro off into Red Dragon, get the Malicious, Synchro off into Colossal, and that's an easy OTK. So You can still OTK and you can still combo even with like really bricked hands. Thankfully, our opponent was on Skill Drain and Dark Bribe and not necessarily on like super real back row. If he had been playing a more consistent version of the Dragon List, similar to the one maybe I have posted on the channel recently, perhaps, it could have been a much harder for us, but thankfully he had a few back row that were kind of sus, if you ask me. Amogus sus. And we were able to push through to sort of set up a winning combination despite drawing the double Mali Stratos Book of Life with no zombie, basically. This opening hand is much better. We did side in the Book of Moon. So in this matchup, I side in the Book of Moon, I side in the Lightning Vortex, I actually side in double Doom Caliber Knight, and I side in double Bottomless Trap Hole. Actually, I think I only side in one Doom Caliber Knight, and I side in double Bottomless. So it's 5 cards in. I side out Call, I side out Return, because they can deal a bunch of damage really easily, and Return is pretty dead. So is Call into Drago. I side out 1 Power Well. So that's 3 cards that are dead into Drago, and then I side out double Tomato as well. So it's 5 cards that are dead into Drago that we side out here. You just really have to play around that Drago, because that's the way you lose this matchup, is Drago coming down and then you having too many cards that are dead. So, yeah. Reason I bring in the Doom Caliber so I can crash with Drago. Same thing with the Vortex and the Bottomless. They out Drago, and same thing with Book of Moon. It outs Drago. That's the name of the game in this matchup. You need to have maximum outs to that kind of stuff. Opponent T-sets and passes. This actually ends up being a really, really interesting and symmetrical game. I think for a little while, and then I go ahead and T-set myself and pass. This is just to maybe force him into being the first person to play. We have a lot of reactive cards. We have Mirror Force. We have guys who want to die, give us tutors, etc., etc. So we're just going to play this a little bit slower. Opponent is going to T-set again and then pass back to us. We pick up Bottomless Trap Hole, another reactive card. So here we are sitting with a lot of reactive cards and no way to really proc our effects, which is kind of fine because the opponent isn't really doing anything themselves. We're going to go ahead and T-set again and pass. There's no real reason to attack into his set monsters. If it's a Mask Dragon, for example, it'll just flip face up, and that's like not great for us. Honestly, like sure, it'll turn on our Brain Control if we draw it, but if we draw Brain Control, we have no conversion outside of Foolish Plague, which is just pain, right? It's just suffering. We could Foolish Plague now, but he has too many back row, and stacking and going for a Synchro Play, losing our Plague permanently, could be kind of sus into 2 back row. I'll just say it. It could be kind of weak into 2 back row. And then we also don't really want to put a Totem Dragon. Well, like putting a Totem Dragon in the grave is fine, but my game plan here is to maybe find a way to clear the back row and then go for a Revive King and start picking off his monsters. That's kind of my game plan. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to chill out. I'm going to play a slower game. I'm not going to proc a White Stone. I'm not going to proc an Exploder Dragon. Exploder Dragon obviously would be the best thing for us to attack into, but there's a chance he doesn't even have it in his deck because we saw some strange stuff in the first game. So yeah, we're just going to pass. He sets another background passes. And then we find our first way to start dealing with back row, which is Phoenix Wing. And we have a good discard in Mizuki. So I'm actually not going to commit the Mizuki because that's going to be a way for our Phoenix Wing to sort of turn into a 1-for-1 and not a -1, basically. So we pass the turn. Opponent draws and passes. We pick up Trap Dust Shoot. So this is going to be really good. This is going to give us perfect information on what's in his hand and also give us some sort of idea of what's on his field based off of what we see in his hand. So we set the Dust Shoot and we just pass. We are going to Dust Shoot him in the draw phase, and we're able to take a red med. As you can see, this is kind of why I don't like this trade-in engine. These cards brick, and they don't really do all that much on their own. Blue Eyes on its own does nothing. Trade-in on its own does nothing. They are 2 separate bricks on their own. You're playing a brick to unbrick your bricks, and in general, this is bad deck building in terms of like building a really solid, consistent tournament strategy, more or less. We're able to return the red med to the deck. And he's just kind of boned. I am a little bit surprised he doesn't try to do something with these White Stone, but I guess it makes sense because he really needs it to die. He can't really afford to like swing it into a deep prison. And then if he goes for a Synchro Play, there's a good chance he just gets kind of owned by any single back row. So he's just going to pass a turn. We pick up another Wind Blast, and finally, I feel like we have a chance at sort of making a play that can get us in some sort of direction at clearing his board. He goes ahead and summons Drago. This procs our Bottomless Trap Hole. Drago, again, name of the game, has to be banished. The second it sees play, the second it hits the field, get rid of it ASAP. If this card is able to stick around, use every resource you can to get rid of it because this is the way you lose. You cannot play through this card. It is very, very difficult. It will overwhelm you with pressure and advantage, and inevitably, it will beat you if it sticks around. So I am going to force some sort of interaction point here with the bottomless. Nothing happens. The Drago gets banished, and we're pretty much safe here. That's as good of a situation as we can hope for. We pick up Book of Life, which is really nice. That's going to be a nice extender once something hits his grave. I decided to start going for some shit because I know he has some meme back row that doesn't really do any shit or anything. So I'm going to start like Phoenix swinging into the back row. Maybe he dark bribes me. I don't fucking know. Maybe I get something cool out of this. I Phoenix swing the back row. He goes ahead and returns it to the top of the deck. I Phoenix swing another back row pitching Book of Moon. We no longer need this Book of Moon. He doesn't have access to Drago unless it's set. And he's going to be 2 turns behind with this Phoenix swing resolving on finding another Drago. So I'm cool pitching the Book of Moon here. It's just going to be another -1 anyway. So might as well turn it into a way to clear one of those back row. Now I go for Foolish on Plague. I flip Goblin Zombie. I Mizuki back Plague. I synchro off into Revive King. And my game plan's getting initiated. Plague Spreader plus Goblin Zombie into the synchro is going to give me a Goblin Zombie search. I search for Zombie Master. Now I have not normal summoned yet. I could normal summon Zombie Master, but I feel like it's a bit overcommittal to do such a thing. So I decide to just swing with the Revive King into his monster. And I correctly play around this Mirror Force, probably unnecessarily, but I'm pretty happy that I did play around it because I'm able to keep my Zombie Master. This does suck. We are going to lose our Revive King, and we're not going to be able to clear his monster, so our big push turn didn't end up going so well. And he has no monsters in grave, so we can't exactly Book of Life our Revive King Hades right now. Hades, however you guys pronounce this. How do you guys say this guy? Do you guys say Hades or do you say Hades? I usually try to say Hades, but Hades sounds more badass now that I think about it. Anyway, we're forced to just pass. He picks up Masked Dragon, or he had Masked Dragon, which reveals to me that he has at least one monster set that can synchro with the Masked Dragon, whether that's a Debris Dragon or whether that's a White Stone, I'm not really sure, but he is going to try to make some sort of synchro play to get that Blue Eyes out of his deck to activate that trade in this turn. He goes ahead and flips Totem, flips White Stone, and yeah, he's able to make a level 6. He does get a little bit too cautious here, makes Iron Chain instead of Bryonic. If I was him, I probably would have made Bryonic and then just started like bouncing and like hitting me. Honestly, you have a bunch of extra shit in your hand. If you can bounce both these and then on the next turn find a way to bounce and then red med, good chance I'm just losing that game. Yeah, if your Synchro Monster dies, then for sure, I mean, your Totem Dragon gets cut off, but I mean, you're not really having any sort of conversion in your hand right now because we know his whole hand besides the trap card that we had returned to the top of the deck. You have no conversion outside of this Blue Eyes, which you're going to pitch the trade in for that Totem Dragon anyway. So I feel like going for Bryonic is just a better play. You can pitch your other Totem Dragon. You can play into Bottomless, Deep Prison a little bit better, Phoenix Swing a little bit better, that sort of thing. In any case, they Gold Sark for Red Med, which is interesting. Means they want a fast play. They think Future Fusion is too slow here, which is respectable, honestly. They do just need a Red Med to be able to kind of go for game or just like make a really big push at least. They set 1 back row and they pass the turn. Well, actually, they set 2 back row and pass the turn. So I know that their last 2 cards are Masked Dragon and Totem Dragon from the Dust Shoot turn. And the 2 back row, one of them was the one I returned to the top of the deck and it didn't interact with Phoenix Swing very well. So I'm thinking, okay, there's potential that one of the back row is like an interactive piece that he couldn't use to stop Phoenix Swing. It could still be a Dark Bribe because I don't know, but I'm thinking there's potential it's like a skill drain, something like that. I don't know. In any case, we pick up Dark Armed off the top like the Giga Sack that we are with exactly 3 darks, which is nice. I'm just going to slam it on the table, and I'm going to priority target the Iron Chain. It is a bit greedy to go after the back row. I think it could be good if we hit something that's not chainable, but it's too high risk. He has potentially Torrential. He has Skill Drain. He has other stuff we may or may not know about. Something like Burst Breath could be a consideration. Yes, Burst Breath would kill the Iron Chain anyway, but I just want to kill the Iron Chain Dragon. I don't really know what he's got in his arsenal in this deck, and I feel like not swinging into the chainable back row is just the low risk play. So we're going to do that, banishing the Goblin Zombie. We want to keep both Revive King and Plague Spreader because I can Book of Life the Revive King or the Plague Spreader, and both of those are like pretty solid cards to Book of Life. He books a Dark Armed, which makes me kind of happy because that didn't kill my Dark Armed. And we have Mirror Force to protect him in case they decide to attack. I go ahead and flip my Sangan. I tried a Book of Life targeting Plague and Totem Dragon. Banishing that Totem Dragon, he held to such high esteem. He still has a whole turn cycle before he's even getting this red med, so I feel pretty confident about my position. I pick up Allure of Darkness. I think for a really long time here. I still haven't normal summoned. I decide to just stack for Plague and synchro off into Magical Android, and here I make a bit of an error. I should have actually grabbed Krebins and then used my Allure of Darkness, but instead I tunnel visioned, grabbed Armageddon Knight, and I normal summon the Armageddon Knight and send Malicious. What I definitely should have done though was grab Krebins and just convert my Allure of Darkness right now. If I find another back row, potentially it could just like seal the game 100%. If I find another normal summon that's like really strong, like let's say I find an Armageddon Knight off of that, it's just so nice to have like 2 life cards as opposed to just the 1. Here we send the Malicious, and I think for a really long time about using the Malicious, but I figure even if I draw the second one, that's at least a dark for the Allure, so it's not too bad. And I can just go for 14 plus 24. It's 38 damage. And then next turn we have lethal with Dark Armed if he doesn't clear anything on my board, which is going to be really hard for him to do, which is Totem Masked and nothing else into our Mirror Force. So we attack for 3,800, and then we gain 600 and pass the turn. He does top deck Heavy Storm, which is an insane top deck. It's one of the few cards he could have drawn here that would allow him to stay in this game. Now, he does tunnel vision a little bit on clearing the Dark Arm Dragon, which is a totally understandable misplay because, you know, you got to clear the Dark Armed or you lose. So he attacks into the Dark Armed. However, the better play is definitely to crash into the Armageddon and attack over the Dark Armed. Now, you'll see later, it's possible he just didn't have a third Mass Dragon in the deck to be able to run over the Dark Arm Dragon, which makes this play more understandable. But if he did have a third Mass Dragon in his deck, then he definitely should have crashed with the Armageddon first, attacked over the Dark Arm Dragon, left me with nothing but a Magical Android, an Allure, and a Dream against a Red Eyes Darkness Metal that's coming next turn. That Heavy Storm top deck was insane. So this game has gone really back and forth, surprisingly, considering all of the stuff that has gone down. On our turn, we pick up Solemn Judgment, which is beautiful. It's a perfect draw. It'll allow us to not only set something before we blind Allure, but it will also stop the incoming red med, which is just fantastic for us. I go ahead and use the Malicious. I didn't want to draw into the second one. I set the Solemn. I go for the Allure play. If we draw 2 monsters, like let's say we draw like Krebins or something like that, Krebins Itelli, we can win right now because we just synchro with the Malicious and then win the game with Dark End Dragon. But alas, we draw Space Typhoon Krebins, which is still fine because we have Solemn for the incoming red met. Now it's kind of bad. I just attack with the Android first to see what he gets before switching the Armageddon Knight to defense. He goes ahead and grabs Whitestone. I'm really happy I waited to switch my Armageddon Knight to defense till after main phase 2 because I'm able to run over this Whitestone. He searches a Blue Eyes, but now his hand is Totem Blue Eyes. He has a Totem in the grave, and he's getting red med. He only really has 1 draw step to get rid of the Solemn, and Heavy Storm's already gone. So it's just Trunade, maybe Cold Wave, maybe Space Typhoon. I'm not sure what combination of those cards he's playing. Usually the Dragon decks usually only play just Space Typhoon, maybe sometimes Trunade, but I can't imagine him siding in Trunade in this matchup. So I think it's just Space Typhoon in like your average list, but because this list is kind of different, I'm like, he maybe has 3 outs. Either way, I'm still going to set Space Typhoon just because why the fuck not? Heavy Storm is gone. And if it is Space Typhoon off of the top, then this gives him a 50-50 shot at hitting our Solemn Judgment. So even if he does top deck the out, it's still only an out half of the time. And he might be more likely to hit the second one than the first one because the first one we set before we blind Allured, which means it could be a spell card as well. He gets the red med added to his hand. He goes ahead and brings out the Totem Dragon. He banishes it for red eyes. We have Solemn Judgment to negate the red eyes. He sets. We M-phase Space Typhoon his set, which is a Fiendish Chain. We draw Stratos, which isn't going to matter. We know the set monster is Totem Dragon, so we can attack over it with Malicious and then directly for game with Armageddon Knight and Magical Android. This game was largely changed by a lot of different things. One of the biggest things that I think changed this game was the opponent's inclusion of these weird trap cards like Dark Bribe. I think these cards are not very good in general, but yeah, I mean, they kind of did some stuff this game, but they also kind of didn't, you know? It just kind of like, it's kind of like you get rid of one threat and then you just hand me another one. Because the Teledad deck, especially post sideboard, is just all threats. It's all gas. And like, if you're dark bribing a card, I'm going to draw into another good card. My deck is just 40 good cards post board. So I think even maybe game 1, it's okay. Maybe game 1, you can argue leaving in the dark bribe. But game 2, you definitely got to side this card out. The Heavy Storm allowed him to stay in the game, even though he didn't really have the best conversion off of it. And then the third Mass Dragon, something I'm curious about is if he's playing the full 3 or not. His list is interesting. Again, I do think the Blue Eyes and the Whitestone engine is better left to the turbo variants with Super Rejuvenation. And I think they just clog up these more regular variants that are trying to play a more fair game and make them much less consistent than they need to be. They did some cool stuff. The Whitestone allowed him to synchro into an Iron Chain, but potentially he could have made Bryonic and it could have been a totally different game. So curious to hear your guys' thoughts on this sort of thing. Let me know what you guys think about the updated list. I think it's really, really solid. This is definitely a deck that I'm looking at building in paper. So I mentioned in a previous previous video that I'm going to be building some more paper decks to do paper deck profiles. And this is definitely one of the decks that's like high on my list of decks I want to build because it's just so much fun to play. Even when you brick, you can play out of it, which is just such a rare thing in Edison format in general. Most decks that have bricks like Double Mally, like Diva Hero and stuff, or like Diva Gilman or whatever, you can't really play out of your bricks. But this deck can play out of its bricks, which makes it really, really fun. So yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Like, comment, subscribe. See you guys in the next one. Peace.